Thank you. Actually, I just saw, when Pamela was speaking, I saw my daughter sniggering because we lived in Harrow at that time, and my kids went to that mosque to madrasa. The funny thing is, actually, it's all about interpretation. A lot of these things are about perspective and how you see things. A lot of the young people in Harrow around that time actually thought that they were the opposite. They were too fuddy-duddy, old, mainstream, and not actually caring about the issues that are happening around the world or to them themselves. So some of these things are all about how you interpret everything, really. And it's the same thing with this. I mean, I could go on and on about talking about, we could have a conversation about some of the language that's being used, about some of the things that in the blurb itself as well, but kind of like gloss over that, because actually it's all part of the general conversation I wanted to have, which is rather than repeat some of the things that are being said, is say that we have quite a lot of, we have really poor media literacy in this country, but we also have really poor religious literacy as well. And that's for all religions. We live in what we call, it's like post-20th century post-Christian Europe. From the mid-19th century onwards, you've seen a decline in kind of like in Christian worship, particularly in the West, in Western Europe, not in Southern Europe in particular, or in Eastern Europe. But particularly from the First World War onwards, we've seen that. And actually, when you suddenly have a muscular or conservative form of religion in the public space, it becomes quite difficult to deal with it. Now, this isn't me talking about this is what I believe or whatever. I'm just saying it's a reality check, because when you don't have religion when religion has been, how do I put it? It's been pushed to the sidelines for so long, and it's not part of public discourse for many, many years, and it's actually in the past. And I even put my own career into that when I was working in the BBC in the early days. Anybody who wants to work in religion was absolutely, why would you want to do that? Yeah. Whereas, when I ended up moving from current affairs into religion, I thought, why would you not want to be talking about these particular subjects? Doing the first ever interviews with 30 suicide bombers, or the programs about the jihad, etc. All incredible films that we got to make. But what I would say is the problem you've got with a lot of these kind of films that we're actually probably making them now, because the problem is we don't have the same kind of knowledge base in the audience that would come to these documentaries. When I made some of those programs, we'd get 2 million viewers. We're getting about 200,000 or 300,000 viewers for documentaries now. So the fact of the matter is everything has changed. So we tend to kind of like make decisions based on what we knew sometime before. Even the use of the word Islamism to talk about things like, Hizb ut-Tahrir, for instance. The fact of the matter is Islamism is the use of democratic means to achieve a Muslim state, as it were. It's not, but yet we'll describe it for Hizb ut-Tahrir. You actually believe, no, it's not criticism, but I'm just talking about the language and how times evolve and how we may need to start thinking about the language and how opinions in this subject matter changing as well. And that is actually, Hizb ut-Tahrir don't believe in democracy. They say you shouldn't vote. So therefore, how can they be Islamist in the classical sense of what Islamism means? We also, journalists and politicians, will use to describe ISIS as Islamist. Well, I think a nihilistic death cult of nutjobs is completely the opposite of using democracy. I don't think they had a concept of the word. I don't think they could spell bloody democracy, let alone actually implement it. So the fact of the matter is, if things evolve and how we define them, we should be thinking about how we use language, but also about how we interpret things. If we have this lack of religious literacy, this lack of media literacy, then what we get is situations like we found this summer with this misinformation that can be used. When there's a lack of knowledge, you can say what you want about something. And you can actually, into that vacuum, things can be said, people can believe certain things, and they can believe it. So if I was to say to you, we do a survey tomorrow with the British public and say, what's the percentage of Muslims living in this country? They will say around between 30 to 40%. Right? That's what generally happens every time there's a survey. We do know, for the last census figures, it's 6%. Right? It's not 30 or 40%. It's 6%. Why is that? It's because of the obsession that we have on the media and on social media as well. So therefore, this information, the obsession, this lack of knowledge of who people are, what they really believe, not just Muslims, but everybody, this lack of media literacy, which allows people to believe stuff. They believe this misinformation because they don't know any different, because they don't know the difference between somebody who calls themselves a journalist on social media and somebody who works for a regulated journalist entity. They don't know any of these differences, and into that world we have this mix where basically we can say and think and talk about people how we like, and as everybody else on this panel has already said, well, that's not really correct, because people are individuals and they have the same belief, the same desires, etc., to achieving, and alongside that, you have bad people as well. Right. Anyway, so I've just ruffled on, but that was basically the point.
Thank you.